Hi, Fearless followers. This is Kevin with your Fearless Word of the Day. And we are in Acts chapter 4, verse 32. And it's interesting. When I read this, I thought, I just taught on this last week to you. And what I realized is that what was expressed in Acts chapter 2, the verse that I taught on, and what's expressed here is really similar. So let me read it, and we'll talk about it for a moment. It says, all the believers were one in heart and mind. No one claimed that any of their possessions was their own, but they shared everything they had. And what's interesting is right after the Holy Spirit came on the believers and the church was launched with 3,000 people being baptized, there was just this outpouring of goodwill. Remember, a lot of people had stayed in Jerusalem because that was the only way they could learn about Jesus, and that meant that they had to stay in people's homes. And so everybody's whole lives were turned upside down as they with a singular focus wanted to learn and follow Jesus more wholeheartedly. And one of the things that happened is that they were just super generous to each other. And then we read in Acts 4 virtually the same thing. The believers are still being incredibly generous to one another. And what's interesting is we don't know exactly, but it's at least weeks, probably months, maybe even years later. In other words, this outpouring of generosity wasn't just short term. This was just something that happened in the community. I was reflecting on that, this idea of being generous toward those that have needs or generous for the cause. Had a good friend, in fact, he died earlier this year, an older guy that I knew named Jim. And he and his wife had always been great with their money. And then their adult son got into some trouble, and they ended up spending tons of money trying to help their son out. And we know that as parents or as people in a family, that we would spend money for our kids sort of regardless of how much it cost us, regardless of how financially astute it was. I mean, we would do it because it's our kids. One of the things that Jesus said is that our family grows when we become believers. It's not just our biological family anymore. It's actually all of us together. And you see that happening in the early church, is this attitude about possessions is, of course, we would share them. Of course, we would help out family members, fearless family members, if we need to. And that is definitely the heart and the spirit of what we're learning here. And it's just a great thing for us to think about. Does our generosity, does our do our financial possessions extend beyond our nuclear family to our spiritual family? Do we think in terms of whatever it takes? I mean, I'm all in for the family. We're, of course, in this generosity initiative right now, and that's one of the questions we're asking, because that's something that we're all going to be thinking about and committing to in a little bit. And so it's just a great thing to think about right now is, do we have this same kind of commitment that believers did when the church was launched? Look forward to seeing you this weekend. Have a great week.